So this is a bit of a taking a step back. I'm going to give a kind of a shorter post thinking through what I'm doing here, because I've been making these lectures trying to figure out what I'm doing, so to speak. And I am offering the following. What does it mean to be a college-educated person? What does it mean to be educated? It's not so obvious, especially in an era of AI. And I was talking to my students the other day, and I showed them ChatGPT and Google Bard. And I said, hey, let's write the essay with ChatGPT. And I'm working on, I said, here's me. I'm working on this essay I'm writing on Tolkien and Aquinas and narrative. So I tell it, write me an essay, a college level essay on Tolkien and Aquinas and narrative and story, and bloop, it writes it out. And it's not a great essay, but it's a pretty good start to build on. And this is just 6 months in, and in 6 years, and in 16 years, it's going to be doing really very human mimicking type writing and speaking. So what are you doing in college for? Because this thing can take your job, or maybe you don't need to learn how to write essays, and you don't need to learn how to read long, complicated texts or novels that are 500, 600 pages long, unless you want to really be college educated and be different. And so that's one of the things I want to get at. I want to be, if you say, I want to be someone who creates things, who thinks original thoughts, who wants to have intellectual conversations with thoughtful persons late into the night, talking about ideas from Plato and Nietzsche and the Quran and so forth, and the Tao Te Ching. Or you can just not do that and just entertain yourself and live your life and probably pretty much get by. But if you want to be someone who has those intellectual conversations late into the night, sitting around a table, smoking cigars if you smoke, or drinking beer, and if you want to be, well, you're going to have two things in your life. Two addictions. Addiction to reading really long books. Addiction to conversating about ideas. Because you need these addictions to counteract the other addictions that my iPhone and my screens and my YouTube are going to be pulling me into, and my Netflix. And because it's not enough, I mean, we can hold back those things, but we need to replace those loves with a deeper love, a deeper addiction. I'm calling it addiction. That's really an improper term, but I'm using it on purpose, because we need to fight against this liquid modernity, this meaning crisis that we're experiencing. And so this is what my channel is trying to get at, and getting you and me excited about reading really long books full of ideas, novels, Dostoevsky, Austen, philosophy texts, Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, Merleau-Ponty's Phenomenology of Perception, even lesser works. Doesn't have to be like the great works, but like or great films like Blade Runner, or great series like Black Mirror. So I'll be offering these videos and these lectures, and you're not necessarily going to watch every one of them or listen to them, although you can, but it's more, I'm going to show you what I've got, and you can kind of dip in here where you can say, I want to take this course, and I'll talk about my courses in a bit here, and like go through it for 3 or 8 weeks and kind of get deeper into some texts. and get addicted to reading, get addicted to talking and conversating. That's what I'm offering. And so what am I? I'm a literary mythical thinker. I'm committed to using the language of modern secular thinkers, and that's what I work in. I'm working in a university, a secular university. But my work seeks to marry religious with modern critical thought. Religious with modern critical thought. I think this is something that I can offer that a lot of people are not offering, or most people aren't. Why marry these things? Because our mythopoeic stories, films, and shows that I was just talking about, they have a quasi-religious function, and I'm not sure. I'm still struggling with what do I call it? Quasi-religious? Do I call it secular? Do I call it mythic? Mythopoeic? Anyway, I'm going to be working on these ideas. And here's my thesis, and I've said this before, that when the Enlightenment came in and it deleted the myths from our lives, mistakenly thinking, oh, these are just kind of extraneous, the myths rushed back in the common culture that was there, which is consumer culture, commodity culture, and it never really went away. It just kind of moved over, and that's why it's in Hollywood, and even in music, and in the music industry, and to some extent the advertising industry. That's where the myths are, the ritualized myths that used to be more in like temples and processions and religion proper. They're still in religion. People still have religions, but anyway. And we're partly in this meaning crisis because if you starve people of narrative and myth, they're going to starve, or they're going to go crazy, or they're going to have a meaning crisis. And maybe like 1% of them can be authentic and like kind of create their own culture because they don't need to like lean on the tradition of some other previous tradition. Although everyone's leaning on some tradition, even the person who's anti-tradition is leaning on that tradition. But if you starve people of that, they're going to look for phony narratives out of desperation, cults, extreme politics, conspiracy theories on the right and on the left. And you know, maybe there's like 1% of the brilliant of the people are those brilliant people. 1% of the people are brilliant people who can invent their own culture, like Nietzsche, like Freud, like Virginia Woolf, like Ezra Pound, Sylvia Plath, or Ernest Hemingway. And those being, especially someone like Ezra Pound, who kind of says, okay, like I'm just gonna like take everything. I'm going to read Chinese literature and American literature and Greek literature and German literature and kind of fuse it into my cantos and like mix them all together, and that's me. Well, you can do that if you have all day to like read all those texts and learn all those languages, but most people aren't that smart or don't have that much time to do that. And then even if you look at people like Ezra Pound and Ernest Hemingway and Sylvia Plath, like those were geniuses, but many of them ended up in an insane asylum or in suicide, or anyway, it's not so easy to invent yourself. And nor is it easy to just kind of say, oh, we'll just turn the clock back and revivify the traditional cultures, the traditional ancient narratives. No, we're not going to do that either. We're in a permanently multicultural situation. And in that permanently multicultural situation, we do need some kind of public, secular, quasi-religious re-enchantment. Let's call it quasi-religious re-enchantment through mythopoeia. Tolkien, who writes the poem Mythopoeia, he's like my key. But you know, Tolkien or Star Wars or Dune, Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, Star Trek to some extent, Lion King. We have the mythopoeia. We have the ritualized mythic stories, just like the ancients did when we go into the movie theater and we're in a community and we're all looking and it's dark and there's this powerful music and our emotions are stirred up and there's a bard telling us the story and we see the heroic images and the violence, just like the ancient cave painters, rituals, and bards and shamans did. We're in the same place, in the same situation, the ritualized mythic stories. And so when I see the world, I don't simply see a collection of dead things, objects that are just laying there doing nothing. It's a mistaken notion that's very common. I think it's maybe even the most common view of it, like there's the subject and there's the object, and it's just a simple subject graphs object. No, language is in between there, myth is in between there, story is in between there. That might seem like a strictly scientific way of talking about perception, but I'm arguing this. Rather, I see and perceive through a narrative or story, and through the stories that I have drunk in and internalized, often in ritualized story, like going to the theater. I was recently in the theater watching Shazam, the second Shazam. It was amazing. It was a great film, by the way. But it was so mythic. It had 3 ancient Greek goddesses in it. And they've come back. It's so cool. And then they go into the museum and they have the mythic staff that Shazam had broken them apart, and then they put it back together again. Anyway, the mythic stories are still theirs. I mean, we just need them. Hollywood sees that, and they're making money off of that. And so here are some of the ideas. What are the courses that I'm going to offer? And I'm going to post these on Twitter soon. I'm thinking this summer. And here's one course could be on Dostoevsky's The Possessed, Nietzsche's Birth of Tragedy, and McGilchrist's The Matter with Things. Or a course on Oscar Wilde's The Decay of Lying, an essay, and An Ideal Husband, his play. Or a course on Wilde's Picture of Dorian Gray, Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, and Freud's Civilization and its Discontents. Marrying kind of the religious and the secular thought, bringing it together into dialogue, into conflict, having that conversation of ideas. Aquinas on beauty, Merleau-Ponty on perception, Iris Murdoch's novels. Iris Murdoch's, I'm really getting interested in her. Seems like she's an atheist, but she's deeply religious, interested in religion and writing about nuns and this kind of thing. Black Mirror, Brave New World, and the Aeneid. So that's the image, that's the gist that I'm trying to do, that I'm trying to offer as an antidote to the liquid modernity, as an antidote to the fracturing of our brains into screens and distraction, fostering an addiction to long books, really long books, an addiction to talking and talking and talking about ideas, deep into the night. This is the goal. This is what I need, and I think this is what many of you need. This is going to be our antidote. And I think it's also, without exaggerating too much, going to save civilization. So that's what I've got. So let's keep going.